Shemel Shai. Yahweh Shemel Shai. Barakatah Yahweh Shai. Barakatah Yahweh. Barakatah Yahweh. Barakatah Yahweh Shai.
The hardest walk leads to the greatest destination. And what's our destination, brothers? The kingdom, man. The arms of Yahweh Shai, man. The scriptures tell us in the Apocrypha, there's a day coming where Yahweh Shai will place crowns upon the heads of the brothers that maintained their faith in him, that believed in him. He shall place crowns upon their heads. Ezra saw that, man. Our great forefather Ezra saw that in a vision. We want to be part of that group, man. We want to be one of those individuals receiving that crown from Yahweh Shai. You know how great that is? I couldn't begin to possibly explain that in words. Words can't even explain the joy of that. Okay?
And when the chief shepherd shall appear, ye shall receive a crown of glory that fadeth not away.
And what is our destiny? To be in this truth. To be in this truth and to make it to the end. As it is written, to finish the work, like Yahweh Shai said. I've finished the work, you know. The Apostle Paul said the same thing. Henceforth I know there's a crown of righteousness that is laid up for me. Okay, that is our destiny.
Blessed is the man that endureth temptation, for when he is tried, he shall receive the crown of life which the Lord hath promised to them that love him. The Spirit itself beareth witness with our spirit that we are the children of God. And if children, then heirs of God, and joint heirs with him. If so be that we suffer with him, that we may be also glorified together. For I reckon that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory which shall be revealed in us. For the earnest expectation of the creature waiteth for the manifestation of the sons of God.
All right. Shalom. First and foremost, I would like to give all praise and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakakwadash, and double honors unto the apostles and the elders of GMS who rule well, teach well, being great examples towards younger brothers. And peace and blessings, salutations to the hopeful lake out there pushing his word and truth and then sincerely across the four winds in the name of Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai, pushing to get up out of here. Shalom to the hopeful lake, the believers, the listeners whom have came back to the obedience of the scriptures to faith in Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai. All right, and what I want to get into today is dealing with the book of First Corinthians. Continue on in the series. As we made it to the 6th chapter, and this is a heavy chapter. The three main topics. Us. Going to be judges. Shalaki of the new world. Beginning with the Israelite men, beginning with the first fruits. Okay, which are going to be judges. Okay, of the new age under Yahweh Shai. All right, it deals with temple harlots. Okay, idolatry, which was current. Was drenched. Okay, in idolatry. Okay, and a culture of temple harlots, which we're going to get that history and backdrop as well. Our Ratazah, and dealing with how we're purchased by the blood of Yahweh Shai. So there's three heavy talking points, dealing with, First Corinthians, the 6th chapter, so Lord we'll go through it, and Lord will, you brothers, all right, and you sisters are edified, so let's get into it. First Corinthians chapter 6, verse 1, it says, when one of you has a dispute with another believer, how dare you file a lawsuit and ask a secular court to decide the matter instead of taking it to other believers? Okay, so you had believers, taking each other to court and, having lawsuits one against another, within the secular courts, occurring. So Apostle Paul was like, look, what are y'all doing? You see, why are y'all taking each other to court, to secular court? And this shows you that the Corinthians, they didn't know they didn't understand what they was a part of. Okay, they didn't understand, the purpose of the wisdom. Okay, that they was coming into. Remember, they were just focused on boasting. You know, they was focused on clout. Okay, they came with wisdom, not the actual application of the true wisdom of the scriptures. So Apostle Paul, he's reeling them in. Okay, and the beautiful thing about it, this church, repented from a lot of the things that Apostle Paul, was addressing. So the Church of Corinth, okay, it was problematic. It was troublesome. Okay, but the beauty of it all, is that they repented. Okay, and then you'll go into the second. We'll get to the second, epistle of Arazazar, but let's keep reading. It says, "Don't you realize that someday we believers will judge the world? And since you are going to judge these little things amongst yourselves," so he's letting them know, look, we're going to judge the world, the earth. This lets you know the Apostle Paul was teaching to them about what? A kingdom. Okay? This is how the Apostle Paul, he talked about the kingdom. And this is evident when you go here to the book of Acts. Okay? The last chapter. Let's get this in the book of Acts. Show you the Apostle Paul was teaching rulership to the Israelite foreigners, man. Okay? When you go Acts 28 and 23 says, so a time was set, and this was Apostle Paul, he was uh being held, okay, by the courts, okay, because he had appealed to Caesar, so he was awaiting, to be shipped to Caesar, so he was being held. And you had Jake coming to see him, okay, and now the Apostle Paul, he pretty much having to sit down, with these Jakes that knew that they were Israelites, and he's expounding on them into this doctrine, because this doctrine is new, to the circumcision, especially those that was outside of Judea. Okay, so let's go here and see what Paul was expounding on. Acts 28:23 says, so a time was set, and on that day a large number of people came to Paul's lodging. He explained and testified about the kingdom of the Most High, and tried to persuade them about Yahweh from the scriptures, using the law of Moses and the books of the prophets. He spoke to them, all right, from morning to evening. So Apostle Paul was explaining the kingdom. He was explaining Yahweh, okay, from the Old Testament, which is the only, books they had. They was living the books of Acts. These epistles was being written, as they was teaching, okay, out of the Old Testament. It was what? Teaching the kingdom, teaching rulership. Okay, it says, and after they had it says some were persuaded by the things he said, but others did not believe. So, yeah, some believed and some didn't. But the point was, he was teaching about the kingdom. All right, as you know, well, he was teaching in all the churches. You see, so that's why he's telling them in the book of Corinth, no, you're not. All right, that the believers, the saints, okay, which are Israelites, will judge the world, and it's a part of salvation as well. Okay, being delivered from captivity to rulership. Okay, and it says, and since you are going to judge the world, can you not decide even these little things, all right, among yourselves? So let's go to show. Let's get some precepts to show that. Okay, let's go here. All right. Um, let's get First Samuel chapter 2. Okay. In verse I started at 8. All right. First Samuel 2 and 8. It says he lifts the poor from the dust, and we're that poor, okay, that's been lifted from the dust of confusion, a lowly estate, a confused, lowly estate, which this is what we've been in America. This is what we've been in this whole beast system, this global beast system that runs the earth, where Israel has been poured in the dust. All right, a lowly, confused state. But this wisdom, all right, has lifted us up, is lifting us up, okay, all the way back to rulership, or righteous rulership. You see, like it says in the needy, from the garbage dump, a place of dishonor. He sets them among princes, placing them in seats of honor. For all the earth is the Lord's, and he has set the world in order. Okay. So Apostle Paul, he's teaching these things to the church of current. Like, look, y'all finna be rulers, man. And y'all can't judge these small affairs amongst y'all, and y'all gonna be the rulers of the world, of the earth. Okay, let's go here to Isaiah. You see, I'm saying that this just shows you Apostle Paul was teaching the kingdom. Okay, rulership, man. You know, this is read this in the KJV. This is the book of Isaiah, chapter 1, verse 25. It says, "And I will turn my hand upon thee and purely purge away thy dross and take away all thy tin." Okay, and this is, 2/3 being purged from the 1/3, and also within the 1/3, impurities. All right, we're being refined, and impurities are being purged out of us. As we're being purged and refined for the kingdom. Okay, so you're gonna have 2/3. All right, because he said, "I will turn my hand upon thee." The ultimate is Yahweh Shai, is doing the purging. Okay, the hand of the Most High. You see, so we're being refined. 2/3 are being purged, going to be purged away. Okay, all the poor quality, okay, from Israel is going to be purged away, and then the poor quality within us, within the hopeful elect, Lord will that number, the 1/3, is being purged away. And why? Okay, it says Isaiah 1:26, "And I will restore thy judges as at the first, and thy counselors as at the beginning. Afterward thou shalt be called the city of righteousness, the faithful city." So the Lord is restoring his sons as judges, okay, righteous judges, all right, and counselors. You see, so it's going to be, the earth is going to be ran by what? A righteous council, okay, of Israelite men, okay, under Yahweh Shai. You see, so Apostle Paul, he's going into these things. So when he hears about these lawsuits amongst the churches, he's like, what are y'all doing? y'all in preparation to be judges over the earth. But y'all got lawsuits on each other. Like, nah, that's backwards. Okay. Um, verse 3, it says, "Know ye not that we shall judge angels? How much more things, all right, that pertain to this life?" Yeah, because we're even gonna have, we're gonna govern angels, as far as we're gonna be able to make executive decisions. All right, in life is gonna be a dispute. Angels gonna be having disputes against one another. No, we're gonna be able to make executive decisions, judgment calls concerning the angels. Okay, and scriptures speak about certain nations not getting any rain, that don't come, they don't report, to the feast days. Well, that's going to be the angel, just as Yahweh Shai. Okay, let me see. I think there's Matthew 8. Okay, let me see. Because when Yahweh Shai quieted the storm, okay, yep, I remember Matthew 8. All right, just to give you an example. All right. And it says, Matthew 8:24 says, and behold, there arose a great tempest in the sea, and so much that the ship was covered with the waves. All right, but he was asleep. And his disciples came to him and awoke him, saying, Lord, save us, we perish. And he said unto them, why are ye fearful, O ye of little faith? Then he arose and rebuked the winds and the sea, and there was a great calm. But the men marveled, saying, what manner of man is this that even the winds and the sea obey him? Okay, which that storm was what? Angels staring up the seas. Okay, so he, all right, made the angels to calm down. He said, even the winds and the sea obey him. So in the kingdom, we're gonna have that authority like Yahweh Shai had. You know, he told the angels to calm down, you know, and they obeyed. Even the demons, you know, they asked permission from Yahweh Shai to what? To go into, all right, that swine. You know, when Yahweh Shai would, all right, rebuke demons off people. Okay, those demons were what? In complete subjection under Yahweh Shai. Okay, so we're gonna have that type of authority in the kingdom, you know, to where we can put demons on people, man, on nations. All right, we can play their weapon for disobedience. You know, we're gonna have that to our disposal, okay, in the kingdom. So that's what it means, and what we're gonna be able to judge, you know, angels, okay, on the left hand and on the right. You see? So going back to First Corinthians, the 6th chapter, you see, look at this in the NLT. Uh, 1 Corinthians, all right, 6:3 says, don't you realize, all right, that we will judge angels? So you should surely be able to resolve ordinary disputes in this life. If you have legal disputes about such matters, why go to outside judges who are not respected by the church? I am saying this to shame you. Isn't there anyone in all the church who is wise enough to decide these issues? Okay, he's saying that in a, you know, he wants to make them feel, you know, embarrassed for even doing it. You know, here it is. You can't decide these matters amongst yourselves, and not only that, but you take it to the secular level. So now you're putting burdens on each other with lawsuits, man. You know, it said, but instead, one believer sues another right in front of unbelievers. And then what does that say about the church? Okay, here it is, y'all followers of Yahweh Shai, but y'all, all right, in disagreement in front of, you know, a secular court, man. What does that say about, you know, the church? What kind of, you know, it puts a bad name out there, man. Like they can't even, you know, they sue each other, you know. So it says, verse 7 says, even to have such lawsuit with one another, all right, is a defeat for you. Why not just accept the injustice and leave it at that? Why not, all right, let yourselves be cheated? He like, you're better off, you know, just taking the low amongst one another. Certain things happen, you know, you better off just taking the low, okay, then going that route, you know, and getting lawsuits and getting, you know, the secular courts involved. Okay. It says, instead, you yourselves are the ones who do wrong and cheat even your fellow believers. Don't you realize that those who do wrong will not inherit the kingdom of the Most High, man? So Jake was still grime in. You know, Jake coming from this, you know, this Greco-Roman culture, man. This grimy Greco-Roman culture. You see? Just as we come from, all right, this new Greco-Roman society. Okay? So Apostle Paul is constantly letting them know, like, look, y'all behavior, y'all character, who y'all got to change, man. You know, he's letting them know that these things, their behavior, okay, is not compatible with the kingdom that's to come. Okay, so you read 1 Corinthians 6 and 9. All right, 1 Corinthians 6 and 9 said, "Don't you realize that those who do wrong will not inherit the kingdom of the Most High?" All right, don't fool yourself. Those who indulge in sexual sin or worship idols or commit adultery or are male prostitutes or practice, all right, homosexuality, okay, or like was these things were the norm in the church of current, okay, in the city of current, you know. You see, these things bled over into the church to where they had to be, addressed and rebuked sharply. It said, or are thieves, or greedy people, or drunkards. It said, or are abusive or cheat people. None of these shall inherit the kingdom, okay, of the Most High. Okay, so you let them know, man. Look, what y'all came from, that got to change. Ain't no compromising with that. You see, it says some of you were once like that, but you were cleansed, you were made holy, you were made right with the Most High by calling on the name of the Lord Yahweh Shah Hamashiach and by the Spirit of the Most High. You know, so the Apostle Paul let them know y'all was into these things, but this word is meant to cleanse you, to make you holy, to make you separate, to make you different. Okay, and it's through the spirit and power of Yahweh, and it shows the power of Yahweh. Okay, to take this church in the midst of this filth, and to begin to reform them in the spirit, to begin to purge them in the spirit. You see, it took some sharp rebukes, and you know, but it just shows the power of Yahweh. You know, was that we see that power today. Which we come from all different walks, and we come from filth, man. You see, and to begin, for Yahweh Shah to begin that cleansing process to where we're being refined, we're being purged, we're becoming those new creatures. That's the power of Yahweh Bashim Al Shah, man. Okay, verse 12, it says, "You say, I'm allowed to do anything, but not everything is good for you." Okay, and this is where you get all things are lawful, but all things are expedient. There's certain liberties we have in Yahweh Shah, but it's not expedient. It won't be beneficial to our walk. And see, this is why being in the spirit goes beyond the law. All right, because if you just base some things on the law, well, there's certain things that you can lawfully do, but will be a hindrance. It will be a hindrance unto us in our walk. Okay, in our office, in our lot. Okay, so everything ain't expedient just because it's lawful. See, and it says, but not everything is good for you. And even though I'm allowed to do anything, which is within the law, certain liberties in Yahweh Shai, I must not become a slave to anything. Okay? You see? Because there's certain things that are lawful, but you can become a slave to these things, overindulgence. Okay? So that's why we all have to be in the spirit, and be in tune with, all right, what the Lord, what assignment the Lord has us on in the spirit. Being in tune with that keeps us from doing too much, man. Okay? You say food was made for the stomach and the stomach for food. This is true. Though someday the Most High will do away with them both, but you can't say that our bodies were made for sexual immorality. They were made, okay, for the Lord, and the Lord cares about our bodies. So now he's segueing into the culture of what you had, temple harlots and uh, idolatry. Okay, which we're gonna get into that. You see, because it was a heavy culture, with temples and idols. Okay, and current. It says, "And the Most High will raise us from the dead by His power, just as He raised our Lord." All right, from the dead, let them know that they was gonna get new bodies. Okay, like I said, these old bodies. Okay, the Most High gonna do away with them both. Talking about these old bodies. Okay, but then he's reinforcing that even though we're gonna get new bodies, we can't wild out in these bodies. Especially being linked to idols, linking the church to idols, man. Okay, what you're gonna get into. It said, don't you realize that your bodies are actually parts of Hamashiach? Should a man take his body, which is the part of Hamashiach, and join it to a prostitute? Never. Okay, and mainly this is speaking about idolatry and that culture of temple harlots that was in current, because those temple harlots, okay, were associated with idols. Okay, we're going to get their history. It says, and don't you realize that if a man joins himself to a prostitute, he becomes one body with her? For the scriptures say, the two, all right, are united in one. Okay, so let's let's read some things upon it. Okay, so first let's go here. God, I'm like, how about you now? So you go here. Okay, temple harlots and current. It says, um, yeah. So it said, even though the temple of Aphrodite had fallen into ruins by Apostle Paul's time, yet successors to it, 1,000 prostitutes continued to ply their profession on the streets of Corinth. Many of them were no doubt housed in lost. All right. Let's see. I think I looked at some stuff on down. Here we go. Yep. It says Corinth, all right, was home to several important temples, most notably the Temple of Apollo in the ancient city and the famous Temple of Aphrodite at the top, all right, of the Corinth, all right, uh, Acro Current fortress. It says other notable temples include the Temple of Octavia, all right, and sanctuary dedicated to Hermes, Demeter, Poseidon, and nearby uh, Ish, Ish, Ishmael, all right. And it says key temples in and around Current, all right. You had the Temple of Apollo, okay, the Temple of Aphrodite, the Temple of Octavia, the Temple of Demeter and Corey, all right. So Current was full of pagan temples, all right, surrounded by, all right, pagan temples, okay. Now, when you go, all right, dealing with the temple prostitute, it said the purpose of temple prostitutes were diverse and debated, but they were likely involved in acts of religion worship related to fertility and divine marriage, or provided a service, all right, that generated revenue for the temple. So they will be in there being pimped out. That's why Apostle Paul, he deals with whoremongers. He talks about those whoremongers will not inherit the kingdom. Which is like in a pimp. Okay, because a monger is a merchandiser of something that's uh, uh, dishonorable. Okay, so Apostle Paul addressed whoremongers. Okay, as temple servants, or in some case were a metaphor for religious or moral unfaithfulness in ancient texts. We're gonna get to that as well. Not customs. All right, it said possible purposes, fertility rituals. In some cultures, sexual intercourse was viewed as a way to promote agricultural and human fertility, and temple prostitutes acted as a conduit for divine blessings. So you go in there, all right, and you deal with those temple prostitutes, for a good harvest, and you see, for increase and and wealth and blessings from the gods, see different gods. Okay, so these things was a culture. Okay, it says divine marriages, and some practices involve a ritual known as Heros Gamas, or sacred marriage, where high-ranking individual will symbolically or literally enact a marriage with a deity to ensure prosperity of a community, man. So it was all, sexual magic, and it was all linked to a deity. All right. It says serving the deity. It says some historical accounts suggest that individuals were dedicated to a deity and offered sexual service as a form of religious devotion, okay, and worship. Okay. So, these temple harlots, whether this was a part of the culture, all right. And Apostle Paul is letting them know, like, look, you can't do that and serve the Lord. You see, you can't go partake in the pleasures of these temples and join yourself to these idols, okay? Which prostitution, these temple prostitutes was, like in the conduit to serving the idols. It was a way you would defile yourself to serve idols. See, the heathen, all right, their rituals and, the things that they did defiled themselves for the sake of their idols. On the opposite, we purified ourselves to serve our power. You know, you couldn't even, you couldn't even deal with your woman before you went into the temple. You had to be pure, okay, in the pure state, okay. Even when King David, when he, had the eat the showbread, well, the priest asked, at least have your men, because it was for the priests, which just shows you in the spirit, all right, that we're going to be kings and priests. King David, was allowed to eat the showbread just in the spirit, show you that we're going to be kings and priests, as it says in the book of Revelations. But the priest asked him, well, have you at least not dealt, and you and your men have not dealt with women, okay? Which they was on a war campaign, so they haven't, even been around women, okay? And then they was, all right, allowed to eat the showbread, okay? Or just show you the culture had the pagans, the heathens had the ass backwards culture that was completely different from ours, man. Okay. All right. So when you go here, it says were temple harlots condemned in ancient Israel. It says yes, temple harlots. All right, often called Quadashah. All right, in the Hebrew, were explicitly condemned and prohibited in ancient Israel's law. And the practice is portrayed negatively, all right, in the Hebrew Bible. Okay. And it says Deuteronomy 28, it's like Deuteronomy 23:17-18 forbids both male and female temple prostitutes, man. That's another thing. You have males in there as well. You have males and females, man. You go into one of those, you go in the temple of Aphrodite's, and hey, you see, they were different, man. Okay, but these things were condemned. Even okay, uh, uh millennium. Okay, before you get to the book of Corinthians. So even during the time of Deuteronomy, because it goes back to the goddamn Canaanites, man, which Esau and Greco-Roman Empire, had Canaanite, okay, qualities to it, man. When it came to his lewdness, okay, we went into that the other day. It said the term refers to a person involved in Canaanite style cultic prostitution, sexual acts within a religious context. It says the passage also bans bringing their earnings, okay, into the sanctuary, reinforcing the condemnation of the practice. While Israel's law prohibited temple prostitution, the prophets mentioned that Israel sometimes adopted Canaanite practice, including cultic sexuality. Hosea chapter 4, verse 13-14 criticizes Israel for practices under the oaks and terebinths, what was it? Terebinths, all right, using the same terms, all right, quadashah, all right, Kodasha, okay, or Quadasha. It says showing that the prophets saw such behavior as evidence of idolatry and moral decline. First Kings 14, 24, 15, all right, mentions male coat prostitution operating in Judah, where reforming kings are praised for expelling. Certain kings will get rid of that. But Jake was wilding, man. Jake was bringing it to the temple. You see, Jake was wilding. That's why the Lord was so pissed, man. Okay, that's that's one of the main things that put us in captivity, man. Okay, was idolatry, man. It says neighboring cultures, all right, Canaanite, Mesopotamian, Phoenician, sometimes associated ritual sexuality with fertility worship. Israel's law codes, however, rejected this, establishing a clear boundary between Israelite worship and surrounding, all right, religious systems. Okay, conclusion: temple harlotry was not accepted in ancient Israel. Biblical laws bans it outright, and prophetic literature denounces any instances where Israel adopted similar practices. Now, as it goes here, we have the difference. Okay, so it says the difference between, all right, which is zanah, all right, and quadashah, okay, in the Hebrew Bible, important. All right, so you had zanah was an ordinary prostitute, general term for a woman who engages in sex for payment, not connected to a religious activity. Okay, those two prostitutes that King Solomon, he judged between. Okay, and he says it even appears in the passage, dealing with Rahab. You know, say Rahab just an ordinary prostitute. All right, it wasn't linked to any religious activity. Now this ain't endorsing prostitution. All right, because this wasn't ideal. It was set up for Israelite men and women to be marriages and be families. That was the ideal. Okay, but you didn't have it. You had certain instances where women would have to do that. Okay, it wasn't ideal. It wasn't a thing of honor. Okay, and like I said, this is not endorsing that, but it happened. Okay, but the ideal way was for an Israelite woman to be married to an Israelite man and be a house. Okay, that was ideal. That was the norm. But you had instances where you had women will have to be prostitutes to make a living. There's circumstances called for that. Okay, but then when you go into the temple prostitutes, you know, it said traditionally understood as women set apart for ritual sexual activity in the pagan temple. Okay, so you had those two types. All right, and what you had in current, all right, was the latter. You had a lot of temple prostitution. Okay, and those temples, I mean, or what judge they was linked to what idols. Okay, so this is what Apostle Paul is letting them look. You can't join yourself with these idols and then be in your house shot. You can't do that. Okay, even when you go back here, let's get this in the book of Judges, chapter 2. Okay, and I think it's 17. All right, it said then, all right, it said, I'll start at verse 17, get to the point. Judges 2 and 17 said, yet Israel did not listen to the judges, but prostituted themselves by worshiping other gods. How quickly they turned away from the path of their ancestors who had walked in obedience to the Lord's command. So the Lord said, look, y'all prostituted themselves by worshiping other gods. Okay, showing you that it was in the spirit, and you had actual, prostitutes in, these different temples. Okay, and these different cultures and customs of the heathen. There was actual prostitutes linked to, all right, worshiping other gods. Okay, but the main thing was those other gods. You see, that Jake was linking themselves to, man. All right, and that's why you go here, and then we'll jump back to First Corinthians. But let's go here real quick to Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 14. Okay, it said, therefore, is Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 14, verse 11 said, therefore, even upon the idols of the Gentiles shall there be a visitation, because in the creature of the Most High Israel, they are become an abomination and stumbling blocks to the souls of men, and a snare to the feet of the unwise, man. You know, and this has been our thorn, this has been our kryptonite as a nation with sin, you know, in general, okay, but sin will manifest themselves into idolatry, you know, serving other gods and living after the culture and customs of these heathens, man. Okay, they worship these other gods. Stumbling blocks to the souls of men and the snare to the feet of the unwise. And this was always our biggest snare. This is how we feel. Going back to the garden, King Solomon. Okay, northern and southern kingdom. Okay, and then when the leadership began to incorporate idolatry, okay, into the government of Israel, okay, it will end bad. We will fall. Okay, we will always end up in captivity, man. It said, for the devising of idols was the beginning of spiritual fornication, and the invention of them, the corruption of life. Okay, and you look at our people today, you see, and you look at how corrupt and degenerate they are, where it all goes back to idolatry, which Esau just enchanting them back to back. You know, each generation gets worse because idolatry is the corruption of life. Okay, because it's centered around filth, being defiled, lewdness. Okay, no order, no structure. Okay, so this is why Apostle Paul was like, look, y'all gotta be separate from y'all. Can't link yourself to that. You know, you can't be associated with it, you can't dibble dabble with it. You know, Drake on the way to meet, you know, the believers, and he stopped by the temple. You know, like nah, man. He's, you know, he on the way to meet the believers and break bread and, you know, go in the scriptures, and he, you know, stops by the temple of Aphrodite for a few. Okay, so Apostle Paul like, y'all can't do that, man. Okay, he said because he was explaining to them, you know, your body is the spirit is dwells in you now. You're a walking temple now. Okay, so you go 1 Corinthians 6 and 17 saying, but the person who is joined, all right, to the Lord is one spirit, all right, with him. Okay, so now that the spirit of Yahweh Bashim Shai is in you, you can't move how you used to move. Okay, it says run from sexual sin. No other sin clearly affects the body as this one does, for sexual immorality is a sin against, all right, your own body. Don't you realize that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit who lives in you and was given to you by the Most High? You do not belong to yourself, for the Most High brought you with a high price, which is the blood of Yahushua, man. So you must honor the Most High with your body, okay? So this is the Apostle Paul. Like, look, you can't, you don't even belong to you anymore. You know, we was purchased, and we have to understand we've been purchased. That's why, you know, we can't just do, okay? We can't go get, you know, it's because these things are unlawful. And then with the temple, you know, that's why you can't just go get tattoos and this and that. And even the C hip, like, nah, you putting something in you that's, nah, this is our temple. Okay, even though these bodies are going to be, all right, discarded at the coming of Yahweh Shai, but for the moment, this is the, the temple we got right now. All right, this is where the Holy Spirit resides, man. Okay, so we have to be mindful of that, man. We don't belong to ourselves. Okay, we've been brought, man, just like you know, like you'll pay the bride dowry. Okay, Lord will, you know, we'll tap into that, you know, in a separate lesson, but you know, we've been, you know, paid for, man. We've been purchased, all right, for a purpose, man, to be separate, okay, to be holy unto our power. You see, so that's the point. You know, I leave it there. You know, Lord will, you brothers, all right, and you sisters have been edified once again. I want to give all praise and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Kakadash, and double honors unto the apostles and the elders of GMS who rule well, teach well, being great examples towards younger brothers, and peace and blessing salutations to the hopeful next Shalom.